Today's conference keynote presentation, a case study about ViX. Please welcome ViX founder and media and technology entrepreneur, Rich Hull.
Okay, so I'm Rich Hull. I started ViX. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of that today. So for those who don't know, TelevisaUnivision is the largest Spanish language media company in the world. ViX is our streaming service. To give you a sense for our scale, we were the first but also the largest player in the Spanish language streaming space. We offer about 50,000 hours of content. 10,000 of that is behind the paywall. We have 130 linear channels. This year we're going to run 70 original film and TV shows that we produce across our 92 sound stages that we own in Mexico and the US. We have a ton of sports. Our sports offering includes exclusive live soccer. We just finished up World Cup, which was great. We just announced last week that TelevisaUnivision has bought the Super Bowl for next year in Spanish, which will be great. And we also announced last week that we have 30 million monthly active users, which is a really big step up. I remember when we had 10,000, we're high-fiving. So at the end of last year, Apple named us the TV App of the Year, which was the first time a Spanish language app had ever won the top global honor, so it was a great honor. And you probably know a lot of that, and maybe some more. And what ViX is as it exists today, because TelevisaUnivision does a really good job of telling that story. So instead, what I'm going to tell you today is a part of the story that you may not have heard, and that's about when we were starting the Hispanic streaming space 7, 8, 9 years ago. And so I'm going to talk about just 3 lessons that came out of those early days and how I think they're playing out in today's market. So today there's ViX, and before we sold it to TelevisaUnivision, the logo looked like that. ViX, with the curly Q thing over there, is a company that my partner Rafael Urbina and I grew. And before that, it was called Pongalo, which was a streaming service that I started in 2016. And then when Rafa and I got together, he had created a large group of social media followers for the Latin market. I'd created a streaming service. We decided to squish our assets together. And it worked really well. Everything we thought that would happen happened in multiples. And then a pandemic hit, and everybody was stuck inside with nothing to do but watch movies and TV shows. And then before that, it looked like this. I started buying up Spanish language film libraries and media companies at distressed prices in the last recession that we had about 10 years ago. And the backstory was that I started my career as a film producer, and then I was teaching a film finance class at UCLA. I was getting a ton of questions about digital and mobile, and people were saying, this Netflix thing, it's gonna be huge, and at least I was smart enough to realize that I better figure it out. So I was getting a little bored with the movie business. One of the first movies I made was the high school movie She's All That, and it did well enough that everyone said, this is what you're gonna do for the rest of your life. You're gonna make teenage movies, which it's a good problem to have. Pays the bills, but there's only so many versions of that one can make before you start to pull your hair out. And LA was kind of becoming a digital media town and a technology town in a way that it hadn't been before. And so I spent 2 years just as a full-time investor for my own account, trying to buy distressed assets, particularly media, and wound up aggregating a whole bunch of Spanish language film libraries. I grew up in Texas, so Hispanic media has always been a part of my world. And there's 2 ways I tell this story. So the public version is that I looked up and I saw that there were kind of 2 incumbent media players in the US for the Hispanic market. It was Telemundo and Univision, and they were, you know, largely old TV channels that people under the age of 50 weren't watching. And I felt like I saw a very clear lane. And so I built a digital streaming company that filled that lane. The reality of it is that over the course of those 2 years, where I probably made 35 different investments in different technology and media companies, one of them completely went south, and I wound up owning 300 Mexican movies because of that. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with these? And ultimately, I looked around and realized there were a bunch of other Spanish language media libraries that were also falling on hard times. DVD had kind of driven off a cliff, and we were in the middle of the housing crisis recession. And so I went around and I started buying them. And when I got 2,000 or 3,000 of them, I realized I had to stand up a streaming service around that. And so then in 2001, we sold that to TelevisaUnivision. We took on some new partners, in particular Wade Davis, who had just become the CEO of TelevisaUnivision and had purchased the company with his partners at Searchlight. And then his former colleague and then partner at TelevisaUnivision, Pierluigi Casalo, who also came from Viacom like Wade did. And then we rolled in Prende, which was a AVOD service that TelevisaUnivision was in the process of launching. We acquired Pantaya, and we rolled that into. So as you can see, a lot went into building ViX as it exists today. Here's a tidbit that I think is kind of interesting, because we thought that we might go and disrupt Netflix, and obviously that was a foolish dream. But we didn't disrupt Netflix in the same way that when like Square came out, it didn't disrupt American Express or Visa. And rather, just like Square did, we built an entirely new market of Spanish language streaming for an audience that was completely unserved. Not underserved, unserved. So today, ViX has settled into its new home with TelevisaUnivision. Got a great leadership team. It's delivering huge wins every week. And I was actually hoping that that Univision would buy us and fire me, but they didn't see it that way. So we agreed I would stay a couple years, and I did that, and then realized that I was kind of missing the CEO chair, and that today I was seeing a lot of those very similar looking recession-driven distressed buying opportunities. So I decided to leave a few months ago, and now I'm working on putting together my next thing, but that's going to be a topic for a future keynote. And it's in artificial intelligence, which is shocking because everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, so I'm just another one of those guys now. So here are 3 things that we learned. So, you know, while it's true that, that I started buying content at distressed prices, at some point I also needed to add big premium content from Hollywood that we could run in Spanish. So I made a content for equity deal with the guys at Revolution Studios. They were one of the big co-financiers that Sony had for many years. They've had movies like Ace Ventura, 13 Going on 30, Black Hawk Down, Hellboy, Daddy Daycare, which I'm biased on because I made the sequel with them. And in this deal, Revolution gave me all their content, but instead of getting paid in cash, I gave them equity in my company. So I came up with a very creative deal, and Revolution jumped at it and grabbed the opportunity, and they were smart. Imagine what the world would look like today if all the US Hollywood studios had done the same thing when Netflix came calling about a dozen years ago. Second thing we learned was be a fast follower. So when I first started Pongaloo, we were originally a subscription service, but then people like Apple started making noises about coming into the subscription space, and competing with Apple is a pretty bad business model. And so we pivoted very quickly to free ad-supported. And we weren't the first ones to do it. Pluto did it, Tubi did it, Zumo did it. And so we just copied everything that they did. And if anybody asked, I said, hey, I'm the Hispanic Pluto. And people would be like, oh, I get that, that makes sense. And I'll tell you, it's way easier copying someone else's playbook than pioneering on your own. So be a fast follower. That's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is convert attention into intention. So I had built Pongaloo. It had become the largest Spanish language streaming service in the world, but even then, nobody would buy us. So I had gotten to know Rafael Urbina, who had started what we'll call Legacy ViX. And he had built a social media business that had 100 million Facebook followers. My biggest expense at the time was paying Mark Zuckerberg to talk to people and try to drive them to my streaming service. And so I realized that if I could talk to those people for free, that was a pretty big advantage. So we sketched out an idea to kind of create a funnel. At the top of the funnel was the social megaphone, driving people down the funnel to the streaming service where we would own them. We rebranded Pongolo as ViX, so it would all make sense. And it worked out. So in other words, we turned the attention that people were giving to Facebook into people who would intentionally, very intentionally come back over and over to our streaming service. And that's a good segue for what's happening today. So there's no longer one coherent strategy. Instead, we've got this myriad of revenue streams that are replacing a single one. And here's what I think the future looks like. So if you're trying to pick the winners and losers in streaming, try to look at it through the lens of these 3 lessons that we learned so many years back. So someone is going to unlock a lot of value in streaming by creating a super app. And I think we might know who's doing it. It's probably Elon Musk at Twitter. They've hinted about doing things like payments and other things. And so, honestly, I think they should buy Paramount Plus or Peacock and create a new category of app that has film, TV shows, messaging, social information sharing, payments, and a lot more. I think they're in a position to grab the opportunity. Be a fast follower. That's rule number 2. Amazon gives you free Prime shipping when you buy a subscription to Amazon Prime, and it's probably the best perk on the planet. Every streamer should be a fast follower. They should build out free, meaningful, real-world perks exactly like this. And number 3, this year, Google acquired the rights to NFL Sunday Ticket, and they're doing that for YouTube TV. So they're planning to convert that attention, which is what you give YouTube, into intention, which is what you do when you sit down and you intentionally go to watch an NFL game. And you add addressable advertising to all that, and it starts to become really special. And so that brings us back to the X Fronts, which is a great event, and I appreciate Tom in the last presentation talking about how much he appreciates OTT.X bringing us the X Fronts. I'm on the board. I love being on the board. I think it's an amazing, organization. And I think what you're going to see today, and what you're going to see throughout the entire event here, is a business that is in real disruption mode. And I think that terrifies a lot of people. But for others, they see it as opportunity. And I think if you're sitting here today at the X Fronts, you're probably one of those people that see it as the opportunity. And so I encourage you to keep fighting for it and grab that opportunity. And thank you to Mark Fisher and to OTT.X for putting on such an amazing gathering. And hope you guys have a great OTT.X X Fronts experience. Thank you.